In the far reaches of the galaxy, beyond the bright stars and peaceful systems, there was a small colony known as Ardent Prime. It was home to thousands of families who had built a new life there. Children played under silver skies, farmers grew crops in red soil, and scientists worked on energy stations that glowed like suns. For decades, it was quiet and beautiful, a place where people believed danger would never come. But one night, that peace broke apart. Without warning, the skies burned. The first explosions came from orbit. Massive ships appeared out of the dark, black and sharp like knives. They belonged to the Vorak, a powerful alien species feared across the galaxy. The Vorak didn't negotiate, didn't warn, didn't talk. They attacked like predators. Their purpose was simple: take everything, destroy what's left. The people of Ardent Prime had no army, no defense fleet. They sent an emergency signal, an SOS, to every direction in space. It was short, weak, and filled with static, but the words were desperate. Help us. They're coming. That signal traveled through the endless space, bouncing between broken satellites, dying relays, and old beacons left from forgotten wars. It crossed empires, passed through neutral zones, and entered systems filled with silence. Many civilizations received it. Some ignored it immediately, others shut it down out of fear. The Vorak were not enemies anyone wanted to face. Helping Ardent Prime would mean war, and the galaxy had grown too soft, too selfish to risk that. So the signal kept traveling, lost among the stars, carrying the last hope of a dying world. On Ardent Prime, the ground shook as the Vorak forces landed. Their ships blotted out the sunlight. The colony's main city burned. People ran to underground shelters, clutching children, sending last messages to loved ones. Every screen showed the same thing: the SOS still transmitting. But as hours turned into days, no answer came. The people started to lose hope. The soldiers that defended the colony fought bravely but were hopelessly outnumbered. The Vorak showed no mercy. They took what they wanted: technology, resources, even humans to use as slaves. In the middle of all this, a small group of engineers worked deep underground to keep the communication tower alive. One of them, a woman named Alara, refused to stop trying. Her hands were bleeding from fixing wires, her face was covered in dust, but she kept whispering, "Someone will hear us." Her teammates told her it was useless, that no one would come. But Alara believed in something more: the stories she had heard as a child about a distant world, a world once known for its courage and its warriors, Earth. Many in the galaxy thought Earth had disappeared long ago. After the last Great War, humanity had gone silent. Their colonies withdrew, their fleets vanished, and their transmissions stopped. Rumors said they were rebuilding. Others said they had destroyed themselves. But some, like Alara, believed that humans never truly vanished. They were just waiting. So with trembling fingers, she adjusted the old beacon's frequency and sent one last coded pulse in a direction where old star maps marked a forgotten route: the Sol system. For days, nothing happened. Then somewhere in the dark, deep in a sector where no one looked anymore, a forgotten Earth defense station caught something faint. It was broken, unclear, and centuries old in its pattern, but the distress code was human-made. Inside a quiet command room, a young officer looked at his console in disbelief. He called his superior, who called another, and soon the message reached the top of the Earth Defense Coalition. When Admiral Kieran Holt received the report, he stood silent for a long time. The words from the transmission echoed through the speakers. "Help us. They're coming." The room was filled with static and fear, but there was something else: a pull, a duty. Humanity had stayed out of galactic affairs for decades, tired of wars that cost too many lives. But this message and this cry for help was different. It wasn't just a call from strangers. It was a call from someone who still believed in them. Kieran walked toward the observation window where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. "How long has it been since we answered one of these?" he asked softly. 37 years, sir," the officer replied. "Do we respond?" The Admiral didn't answer immediately. He looked at the map of stars, remembering the old stories of humanity's courage, how they had once stood against impossible odds, how they had fought for others even when they were broken themselves. The silence that followed was heavy, but then he said just one word: "Prepare the fleet." Across Earth's orbit, the sleeping giants began to move. Massive ships that had been resting in dockyards powered up for the first time in years. Engines roared. Lights flickered. The old insignias, faded symbols of human unity, glowed again. The soldiers, engineers, and pilots who had grown up only hearing legends about past wars suddenly found themselves part of something real. The training drills stopped being routine. They were now the preparation for a rescue. News spread quickly. On Mars, Luna Base, and other human colonies, people gathered in front of screens watching the revival of their fleets. There was no anger, no greed, and only purpose. The message had reached their hearts. Someone out there was suffering, and humanity couldn't stay silent. They remembered what it meant to be human, to fight not for conquest but for compassion. Meanwhile, on Ardent Prime, days turned into weeks. The survivors were barely holding on. The Vorak ruled the skies. Many had given up hope completely. Alara, still alive but weak, sat near the broken transmitter. She whispered to herself, "Please let them hear us." Then, just as she thought her last breath would be her final one, she noticed something on the radar. A faint blip, then another. She blinked, thinking it was her imagination. But then, through the smoke-filled air, someone shouted from the observation tower. "Something's entering the system." The Vorak sensors detected it too, but it was too late. A flash of light filled the sky as massive ships emerged from hyperspace. Their hulls were black and silver, marked with blue glowing lines, symbols of Earth. From that moment, the universe would remember this as the awakening. The humans had heard the SOS. The sleeping giants were awake. But before the battle, before the roar of engines and weapons, there was only silence. A silence filled with determination. On board the command ship Resolute, Admiral Holt stood before his crew. "We don't know these people," he said quietly, "but they called for help. And that's all that matters." Every man and woman in that room stood straighter. No one asked how dangerous it would be. No one hesitated. Humanity had seen too much darkness to let another world fall alone. The Admiral gave the final order. "Plot course for Ardent Prime. Let's remind the galaxy who we are." Engines burned like suns as the fleet moved into the stars. Back on Earth, billions watched the transmission go live. Mothers held their children close, soldiers saluted, and old veterans whispered prayers. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but the moment that signal was answered, everything changed. In that one act, a response to a dying world's plea, humanity reclaimed its place in the stars. The SOS that had been ignored by all had finally found the hearts that couldn't stay silent. The giants were awake, and the universe was about to witness what that truly meant. The decision had been made, and now there was no turning back. When Admiral Kieran Holt gave the order to prepare the fleet, the entire Earth Defense Coalition began to move like a living, breathing giant. The once quiet shipyards in Earth's orbit came alive. Massive cranes swung over metallic hulls. Engineers in silver suits worked day and night, and the sound of welding torches echoed like thunder across the docks. Ships that had been silent for years began to awaken, their engines glowing with the same blue light that had once terrified enemies long ago. Across the solar system, the call spread. From Mars to Titan, from Luna Base to the asteroid colonies, every outpost received the same message. Humanity answers the SOS. For years, Earth had stayed silent, rebuilding in peace and staying away from galactic wars. Many thought humans had grown soft, too comfortable in their safety. But that message changed everything. It was like hearing the heartbeat of an old warrior after a long sleep. Admiral Holt stood in the main command center, watching the preparations through the giant glass window. Hundreds of ships floated in formation, still and waiting for orders. His second-in-command, Captain Mirasato, stood beside him, her uniform crisp, her eyes sharp. "It's been a long time since we mobilized like this," she said quietly. Holt nodded, his expression calm but his mind racing. "Yes," he replied, "but we've waited long enough. The galaxy forgot what humanity stands for. It's time we remind them." Everywhere, people were ready to serve. Retired officers returned to duty. Young recruits volunteered in numbers no one had seen in decades. Even civilians offered help, donating supplies, fuel, and medical equipment. The old spirit of unity, the one that had built Earth's first fleet centuries ago, came back stronger than ever. In the cities, families stood on rooftops watching bright trails of ships leaving the atmosphere, waving as if sending off heroes. Some cried, some prayed, and some whispered to themselves that humanity had found its heart again. Inside the fleet, the preparation was intense. Mechanics checked weapon systems, pilots calibrated navigation drives, and communications officers reconnected old relay networks that had been dead for years. The hum of activity filled every corridor, but beyond all the noise, there was something else, an energy and emotion that no machine could measure. It was pride mixed with purpose. In one of the shipyards, a young engineer named Leo worked tirelessly on an old battlecruiser named Vigilant. The ship had fought in the last Galactic War and was now being brought back to life. "She's ancient," one of his friends said, shaking his head. "She won't survive the first battle." Leo smiled and wiped grease from his hands. "Maybe," he said, "but she still has a human heart inside her. And that's all we need." Admiral Holt spent hours reviewing maps and enemy reports. The Vorak Empire was strong, far stronger than anything humanity had faced in a century. Their ships were enormous, built for destruction, and they had numbers beyond count. But Holt wasn't afraid. He knew that wars weren't won only by power. They were won by courage and strategy. He ordered reconnaissance drones to scan the region near Ardent Prime. When the first images arrived, the room fell silent. The colony was almost gone. The cities were in ruins, the atmosphere clouded with smoke. Millions were dead. Yet there were survivors, small heat signatures scattered across the planet. "They're still fighting," Holt said softly. "Then so will we." On the other side of the fleet, Captain Sato gathered her pilots in the hangar bay. Dozens of fighter ships were lined up, sleek and deadly. She walked among them, her voice steady. "You've all heard the rumors. You've seen the images. The Vorak think we're weak. They think we've forgotten how to fight. But they're wrong. We're not fighting for glory or land. We're fighting for people who believed in us even when the galaxy turned its back. Remember that when you launch. Every move you make up there will mean a life saved down there." Her words spread like fire. The pilots saluted, determination in their eyes. Some were nervous and they had never seen real combat, but the thought of rescuing innocent lives gave them strength. Humanity had always been emotional, driven by feelings others called weakness. But those same emotions were their greatest weapon. Compassion made them fearless. Empathy made them unstoppable. The news of Earth's mobilization soon reached the galactic networks. Across distant worlds, leaders of other civilizations watched in disbelief. "The humans?" one ambassador said. "They're sending a fleet? After all these years?" Another replied, "It won't matter. They're too late. Ardent Prime is finished." But in their hearts, even the most powerful empires felt a chill. Everyone remembered the old stories, how humans had once turned entire wars around with sheer willpower, how their fleets had burned brighter than any star. Back on Earth, the final preparations began. The massive flagship, the Resolute, stood ready at the front of the formation. It was a beast of a ship, long, armored, and armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. Admiral Holt walked through its halls, greeted by soldiers and officers who saluted him with respect and trust. Every face he saw reminded him why they were doing this. Not for dominance, not for pride, but because someone out there had cried for help and no one else answered. Before departure, Holt addressed the fleet. His message was broadcast across every ship, every colony, and even to Earth itself. "Today," he said, his voice calm but powerful, "we stand for something greater than ourselves. Somewhere out there, men, women, and children are dying, praying for rescue. They don't know us, but they believed someone would come. Let us be the proof that humanity never forgets what it means to care. We will face darkness and we will bring light. We are the answer to their call." When he finished, silence filled the channels. Then one by one, the ships sent back the same signal, a heartbeat sound that echoed across the fleet. It was the symbol of unity, the same tone that had been used during the old wars to say, "We stand together." As the countdown to launch began, space around Earth shimmered with energy. The first ships ignited their warp drives, leaving trails of blue fire. Families on Earth looked up and saw those streaks cutting across the night sky like shooting stars. Children pointed, mothers whispered prayers, and veterans smiled proudly. Some said it felt like watching history come alive again, the day humanity rose as one. In the command deck of the Resolute, Captain Sato looked at Holt. "The fleet is ready, sir. Every system checks out." Holt gave a small nod. "Then let's wake the galaxy." The fleet moved into formation, destroyers, carriers, cruisers, and fighter escorts. Over 300 ships surrounded the flagship like a shining swarm. As the warp gates opened, a deep hum filled the air, a sound that shook the very stars. One by one, the ships vanished into hyperspace, heading straight toward Ardent Prime. In the silence that followed, the galaxy held its breath. No one truly believed humans would come. No one believed they still had the strength. But humanity had always done the impossible. From the time they first left Earth to explore the stars, they had defied every limit, survived every disaster, and risen from every fall. This mission was no different. Back in the fleet, engineers monitored power levels while soldiers prepared for landing operations. Some wrote last letters home, others sat quietly, thinking about the people they were going to save. The journey through hyperspace was calm, but the anticipation grew with every passing second. They knew the Vorak wouldn't expect them. They knew their arrival would change everything. For Admiral Holt, the moment felt like destiny. He had spent half his life waiting for something like this. Not for war, but for purpose. "We're not here to conquer," he whispered to himself. "We're here to remind them that humanity still has a soul." Hours later, the fleet began to slow as Ardent Prime's system appeared ahead. The scanners picked up enemy signatures, hundreds of Vorak warships patrolling the skies, confident and unchallenged. But that confidence would soon shatter. The humans were coming and nothing could stop them. For the first time in decades, humanity was united again. Not by fear, not by politics, but by compassion. The galaxy had forgotten the fire that once burned in the hearts of humans. Now it was about to see it again. The SOS that had started as a weak cry in the dark had turned into a storm. A gathering force of ships, courage, and unbreakable will. The sleeping giants were fully awake, and they were on their way. When the human fleet finally arrived in the Ardent Prime system, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. One by one, the massive ships appeared out of hyperspace, glowing blue and silver against the darkness. Their engines hummed like thunder, and their shadows stretched across the burning planet below. The people who were still alive on the surface saw strange flashes in the sky and didn't understand at first. Many thought it was just another Vorak attack. But then, the symbols on the incoming ships became clear. The mark of Earth, the emblem of humanity. For days, the survivors had hidden underground, breathing recycled air, eating what little food was left. When they saw the lights of the fleet cutting through the black smoke above, they cried. Some whispered, "They came. They really came." Others fell to their knees, thanking the Creator for sending them help. No one had believed it was possible. The galaxy had abandoned them, but the humans hadn't. Up in orbit, Admiral Kieran Holt stood on the command deck of the Resolute, watching the planet spin slowly below. The images on his screen showed devastation, oceans boiling, forests burning, cities in ruins. His heart ached at the sight. He turned to Captain Mirasato. "We go in," he said firmly. "No waiting, no warnings. We strike now." She nodded without hesitation. Within moments, her voice echoed across the fleet channels. "All ships prepare for combat operations. Targets are confirmed. Engage at will." The silence of space shattered. Thousands of missiles launched at once, streaking toward the enemy fleet that surrounded Ardent Prime. The Vorak were caught completely off guard. Their sensors went wild as human ships appeared everywhere. Carriers, destroyers, and fighters spreading like a swarm of light. Within seconds, the first Vorak cruisers exploded, their black hulls breaking apart into burning fragments. The humans didn't hesitate. Every shot was precise, every move planned. They fought with emotion, but also with discipline. Inside the Vigilant, the old battlecruiser that Engineer Leo had repaired, alarms blared. "Shields holding at 70%. Someone shouted. "Fire all batteries." Leo watched through the observation window as blue energy beams cut through the darkness. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Humans fighting not for conquest, but to save strangers. His voice cracked as he whispered, "We're really doing this." On the planet's surface, the Vorak army panicked. They had ruled with cruelty for weeks, confident no one would stop them. Now fire rained down from the sky, but it wasn't destruction for them. It was liberation for the people below. The human Marines began descending in armored dropships, entering the atmosphere like burning comets. The ground shook as the first units landed near the Capitol ruins. They fought through streets filled with smoke and rubble, taking cover behind fallen buildings, rescuing civilians, and pushing the enemy back. Among those soldiers was Lieutenant Arya Vale. Her face was streaked with sweat and dirt, her rifle heavy in her hands, but her voice never wavered. "We're here to get them out alive," she told her team. They moved fast, clearing out enemy positions, helping injured survivors. Every scream, every explosion pushed them harder. These weren't just battles for land, they were battles for hope. The Vorak fleet tried to reorganize in orbit. Their commander, a cruel warlord named Korthvak, barked orders through static-filled channels. "Crush them. They are only humans." But his words carried no confidence. He had fought humans long ago, and he knew what they were capable of. He watched as one of his destroyers exploded, then another, each falling victim to precise human strikes. The humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't slow down when wounded. They adapted, learned, and struck harder every time. The battle raged for hours. The void was filled with light and debris, a storm of metal and fire. The human pilots flew with incredible skill, weaving through enemy fire, outsmarting the Vorak at every turn. "Keep tight formation," Captain Sato commanded from the carrier Dawn's Edge. "Protect the landing ships at all costs." Her calm voice gave everyone courage. The Vorak tried to surround the humans, but it was useless. The human fleet moved as one, fast, sharp, and relentless. Admiral Holt stood firm at his station, monitoring the chaos. "Status?" he asked. "We've lost 2 frigates, sir," replied an officer, "but their sacrifice took down 6 enemy cruisers." Holt nodded. Losses hurt him deeply, but he knew every soul aboard those ships had died for something greater than themselves. "We honor them by winning," he said quietly. Meanwhile, on the surface, Ilara, the engineer who had sent the original SOS, heard the sounds of battle growing closer. She couldn't believe it. Through the broken ceiling of the bunker, she saw streaks of fire crossing the clouds. "They came," she whispered with tears streaming down her face. She turned to the survivors hiding with her. "The humans are here." A small child covered in dust looked up and smiled for the first time in weeks. As the Marines advanced through the city, they encountered terrified civilians who couldn't believe what they were seeing. "You came all the way here for us?" one old man asked a human soldier. The Marine simply nodded and said, "That's what we do." Those words spread among the survivors like wildfire. For the first time, they felt safe. Above, the Vorak tried one last desperate move. They launched a massive flagship, a monstrous vessel that dwarfed the others. Its weapons glowed red as it charged a planet-killer beam aimed directly at the human landing zones. The power readings were off the charts. If it fired, millions would die. Admiral Holt saw the readings and didn't hesitate. "All ships," he ordered, "concentrate fire on that flagship. I want it gone." The entire human fleet turned as one. Hundreds of cannons fired in unison, a blinding storm of blue energy. The Vorak flagship's shields flared, holding for a few seconds, but then cracks appeared. The human bombardment intensified. Finally, a massive explosion tore through the ship's core. It broke apart in silence, a symbol of the end of Vorak dominance. The explosion's light reflected off the planet's clouds, turning night into day. The humans had done the impossible. Against an enemy larger and stronger, they had stood their ground, and won. The Vorak fleet scattered, their remaining ships jumping to hyperspace in panic. The skies cleared for the first time in weeks. On Ardent Prime, people came out of their shelters, looking up as the fires began to die out. The smoke slowly lifted, revealing blue skies once again. Down on the surface, Lieutenant Arya looked at the horizon, where the rising sun cut through the haze. Her team had rescued hundreds of civilians, including Ilara. When they met, Ilara could barely speak. "You heard us," she said, trembling. Arya smiled softly. "We always do." As evacuation ships began to take survivors aboard, Admiral Holt's voice came through the comms. "All units, this is Fleet Command. Ardent Prime is secure. Mission success." The crew cheered, cried, and hugged each other. Some whispered prayers for those who didn't make it. Every human there knew they had not just saved a planet. They had reignited a legacy. The battle became a message, carried across the stars. The galaxy that had doubted humanity watched in shock as the footage spread. The burning Vorak ships, the rescued civilians, the blue flags of Earth flying again on alien soil. The words of one witness echoed through the networks. "The humans came for us when no one else would." The Vorak Empire, once feared by all, had been humbled. And humanity, once forgotten, had returned to the galaxy's story not as conquerors, but as saviors. That night, in the quiet of his cabin, Admiral Holt looked out the window of the Resolute. The stars shone brighter now. He thought of the lives saved, of the bravery shown, and of the message sent across the universe, that humanity had not lost its soul. "They'll remember this," he said softly. "They'll remember that we came." The galaxy would indeed remember. The SOS that had been ignored by all had found the one species that could never ignore a cry for help. The humans had awakened, and the universe had just witnessed what it meant when the sleeping giants rose again. The day the first human fleet entered the dark space beyond the known borders, silence filled the command deck. Admiral Reyna stood at the center, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes locked on the massive holographic screen showing a glowing red signal, the SOS that had started it all. For days she had heard reports, warnings, and even protests against sending the fleet, but deep inside her something stronger than fear lived, a voice that said, "If not us, then who?" That voice was not just hers. It echoed in every heartbeat aboard the ships following her command. They were not only soldiers, they were protectors of humanity's legacy. As the fleet drifted closer to the edge of the galaxy, everyone could see the strange light waves coming from the other side, a sign of battle, destruction, or maybe a trap. The air on the ship was heavy, not with oxygen, but with tension. Every soldier remembered the message they had received before departure. "The sleeping giants have awakened. Protect your kind." No one truly understood what it meant. Some said it referred to Earth itself, once quiet and humble, now rising like a giant after being threatened. Others believed it meant something darker, that the real monsters were not out there but within them, waiting to awaken when survival demanded it. The fleet moved in silence, like a pack of wolves stalking through the dark. The ships were enormous, silver giants with scars from previous wars, their engines humming like heartbeats. Each ship carried hundreds of lives, each life carrying a reason to fight. Some fought for family, some for revenge, and others for peace. But for all of them, this mission was more than duty. It was destiny. Hours passed, and then suddenly a bright explosion lit up the front view. The first scout ship, Aurora, had been hit by an unknown blast. Panic broke out for a moment, but Admiral Reyna's voice came through the comms like a blade cutting through chaos. "All units maintain formation. Do not fire unless attacked directly." Her tone was calm but filled with command. The soldiers obeyed. The fleet adjusted its shields and sensors scanned for the source of the blast. What they found froze everyone. In the darkness ahead, thousands of wrecked alien ships floated silently. Some were massive, as large as small cities. Others were torn apart, their metallic bodies drifting like corpses. It was a graveyard of civilizations. The SOS had come from here. But the question was, who sent it and who destroyed them all? Reyna's eyes narrowed as she zoomed in on the wrecks. Strange symbols covered their hulls, languages that no human had ever seen before. But the more she looked, the more she realized something odd. Many of the ships had burn marks from plasma weapons, human weapons. That made no sense. Earth had not been here before, unless someone else had come long ago, someone they had forgotten. As engineers decoded the faint energy signals, a weak voice broke through the static. "This is Captain Jor-El. If anyone hears this, we failed to contain them. Do not repeat our mistake, then silence." The voice was human. Everyone stared at the screen, speechless. "How can that be?" whispered one of the officers. "There are no human colonies this far." Reyna didn't answer. She just whispered, "There were once." Suddenly, the radar beeped again. Multiple unidentified objects approaching fast. "Incoming ships 20 clicks out," shouted the operator. The screen lit up with hundreds of red blips moving toward them. The fleet readied weapons. Engines roared. Lights dimmed. This was it, the moment when history would either remember them as heroes or ghosts. The first wave of enemies came fast. The aliens were unlike anything they had seen. Organic ships pulsing with life, their bodies covered in glowing veins. They moved like predators, weaving through space with unnatural grace. As they got closer, the human fleet opened fire. Blue plasma bolts shot across the void, striking enemy hulls and bursting them apart. The sound of battle filled every channel. The silence of space was gone, replaced by war cries and static screams. Reyna's ship, Vanguard, took a heavy hit, shaking violently. Sparks flew across the deck. "Damage to the rear thrusters," shouted an engineer. "We're losing power." Reyna steadied herself and ordered, "Redirect all energy to shields." "Keep firing." For every alien ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. They were endless, like a wave of darkness trying to swallow the light. The human ships fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. In the chaos, one small fighter pilot named Rian broke formation and flew straight into the enemy swarm. Everyone shouted for him to turn back, but he didn't listen. "If they want giants," he said, his voice shaking but determined, "then let's show them what giants can do." He overloaded his ship's reactor and crashed into the enemy flagship. The explosion was massive, lighting up the dark space like a new sun. Thousands of alien ships disintegrated instantly. For a moment, the humans thought they had won. But then, out of the explosion came something enormous. A ship, or perhaps a living being, larger than anything they had imagined. Its eyes glowed red, and its body was made of both metal and flesh. It looked ancient, like a god forgotten by time. It spoke through vibrations that shook the fleet. "You dare wake us, children of Earth?" Everyone froze. The sleeping giants, they were real and they were not human. Reyna clenched her fists. "All ships target that thing," she ordered. Missiles, plasma beams, and energy bursts flew toward the creature, but it absorbed everything. It was feeding on their power. The more they attacked, the stronger it became. Desperation spread across the fleet. Some ships started to retreat, but Reyna refused to run. She closed her eyes and remembered the message from Earth. Humanity's strength lies not in power, but in unity. She opened a private channel to every ship. "Listen to me," she said softly. "We can't win alone, but together we can become what they fear most. Not sleeping giants, but awakened ones." Her words reignited their hearts. Every ship linked their energy cores, forming a single network. The combined power surged through space, turning the fleet into a blazing formation. The giant creature roared, trying to crush them, but it was too late. Humanity's united energy formed a massive light wave that pierced through the creature's chest. The explosion that followed could be seen from light years away. As silence returned, wreckage floated around them. The alien threat was gone, but so were many brave souls. Reyna looked at the stars and whispered, "We were never sleeping. We were waiting." Her words echoed across the remaining ships, a reminder that humanity was not weak or passive. They were survivors, fighters and guardians of their own kind. In that moment, far away on Earth, the SOS signal finally stopped flashing. The planet was calm again, as if it knew that its children had answered the call. The sleeping giants had awakened, not in anger, but in courage. And the universe would never forget that day. The battlefield was silent now. Space, once filled with explosions, screams, and fire, had gone quiet again. Only the soft hum of the remaining human ships echoed across the void. Admiral Reyna stood in front of the giant viewing window, her eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. Wrecked ships floated slowly around them, pieces of the fallen, reminders of both victory and loss. The war was over, but the silence carried the weight of everything they had lost to win it. The humans had survived. Against impossible odds, they had faced a power greater than anything they'd ever known. The sleeping giants, once hidden in the darkness of the galaxy, had been awakened and defeated. But the cost was heavy. Half of the fleet was gone, thousands of soldiers dead, and entire systems burned out. The survivors knew that even in victory, they were forever changed. No one who had seen that battle could return to Earth and live the same way again. Reyna walked through the ship's corridors. The walls were scorched, the lights flickered weakly, and the smell of burnt metal lingered in the air. Crew members sat quietly on the floor, patching wounds or whispering prayers. When she passed by, they looked up, not with fear or sorrow, but with respect. They knew she had led them through hell and back. For the first time in days, she smiled, though it was faint and tired. She entered the command room where the remaining officers waited. "Damage report?" she asked. One of them, a young lieutenant, replied softly, 70% of the fleet destroyed. Communications are weak but stable. Earth has received our signal. They know we're alive." Everyone breathed a little easier. Reyna nodded. "Good. Then we'll make sure they know what happened here. We'll tell them the truth." A silence followed. Then one of the older officers said, "Ma'am, what if they don't believe us? The story, the creature, the ancient ships, it sounds like a myth." Reyna looked out the window again. "Then we'll show them proof," she said. "Because history must remember. If they forget, they'll fall asleep again. And next time we might not wake in time." Far below them, among the wreckage, the surviving rescue team searched for any signs of life. They found small alien pods, some still active. But instead of killing what was left inside, Reyna ordered them to be taken aboard. Even our enemies, she said, deserve to be understood. Fear comes from ignorance, and we've lived in fear long enough. Her crew hesitated at first, but they obeyed. Humanity had changed that day, not just in strength but in wisdom. As the fleet began its slow journey home, messages of loss and hope filled the comms. Families on Earth cried and celebrated at the same time. The names of the fallen were broadcast across every station, honored as heroes who had answered the SOS and saved not only Earth, but the entire human race from extinction. Among the names was Ryan, the pilot who had sacrificed himself by flying straight into the enemy flagship. His act of courage became a legend. People called him the spark that woke the giants. The return to Earth was emotional. When the first ships entered orbit, billions watched from below. The planet that had once lived in fear of the unknown now looked up with pride. Humanity had faced the darkness of the universe and survived. As Reyna's ship landed, crowds filled the landing grounds, waving flags, crying, cheering. But inside the Admiral's heart, there was still a strange emptiness. She had won, but she had also lost friends, souls she would never see again. That night, under the quiet stars, Reyna visited the memorial site built for the fallen. Thousands of names were carved into a silver wall, shining under the moonlight. She touched the name of Ryan with her fingers and whispered, "You were right. They wanted giants, and we became them." The world changed after that. Humanity united like never before. Nations that once argued about power and politics now shared their resources to rebuild the fleet and explore the stars with purpose. They no longer wanted to conquer. They wanted to understand. They sent explorers, scientists, and peacekeepers to search the galaxies, to learn about the ancient beings who had awakened. They wanted to make sure no dark secret ever threatened life again. A council was formed called the Guardians of Dawn, made up of survivors from the fleet and leaders from Earth. Admiral Reyna was chosen as the first commander of the council. Her mission was clear: to protect humanity not through war but through unity, strength, and understanding. The SOS that once called for help now became a symbol of hope. It was replayed across the world with a new message added at the end. Humanity answered. Years passed, but the memories of the war never faded. Children grew up learning about the day of awakening, the day when humans proved they were not fragile creatures hiding on a small blue planet, but a species capable of standing against giants. Art, music, and literature flourished again, inspired by the bravery of those who had gone into the stars. Reyna, now older, often sat by the great observatory window in the new Space Council building. From there, she could see the rebuilt fleet shining in orbit, larger, stronger, but peaceful. They were not weapons anymore. They were symbols of vigilance and wisdom. She thought about everything they had gone through: the SOS, the battles, the loss, and the awakening. Sometimes she wondered if it had all been destiny, if the universe had forced them to wake up and realize their true potential. One evening, as she sat alone, a young cadet came to her with a message. "Ma'am, we've detected another signal," he said nervously. She turned to him slowly, her eyes calm. "Is it a distress call?" He nodded. "Yes, but it's different this time. It's not human, and it's not hostile." Reyna stood up, feeling a familiar spark in her chest, the same feeling she'd had years ago when the first SOS appeared. "Then we'll answer," she said with a small smile. That's what humanity does now. And so, once again, humanity prepared to journey into the unknown. But this time they were not afraid. The sleeping giants had awakened long ago, and they now stood tall among the stars, guardians of peace, protectors of life, and seekers of truth. As the fleet departed once more, Earth watched from below, knowing that its children were out there not to start wars, but to make sure no cry for help ever went unanswered again. In every heart, one message burned bright. We woke up, and we will never sleep again. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but now it also carried a quiet reminder: the sound of courage, the light of unity, and the echo of an SOS that changed everything. Humanity had proved something eternal. Even in the darkest corners of creation, when the call for help rises, the true giants are not those who sleep in power, but those who wake in compassion. and as the stars shimmered like diamonds against the velvet of night, the fleet disappeared into the horizon, its engines glowing like tiny suns. Somewhere deep in space, another world waited, another story ready to begin. But this time humanity was ready, awake and stronger than ever before.